So.
Well, it's countdown to Sunday.
Sunday on Saturday.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. You're gonna get everybody in. Some people are still out of town. Whoa. Went all the way around. Didn't realize we can go all the way around and go almost 360 degrees. So, hey, Harvey.
Hi there. Welcome back.
This is the time that Harvey does not miss being in Southern California.
No, it's not bad here. It's about 90.
That's what he said.
Yeah. Yeah, we had 110 today at some point. It's what my thermostat said. Well, my outside thermostat.
Yeah,
Yeah.
keep it cooler for the pets in the house.
Yeah.
Actually, it's 91 in Santa Clarita and it's 89 where we live. So 6 of one, half a dozen of the other.
That's
The problem is we get our heat later in the day. So it'll be hot till maybe 8, 9 o'clock.
Oh, that's weird.
Yeah, because we're further north.
Yeah, no, that I know, but it's weird that it's that late. You think it kind of cooled down a little bit.
A little bit, not a lot.
We were very lucky though, Harvey. Very lucky. Why? Because it could have been that hot in Israel and it wasn't.
It wasn't the heat. I'm glad we didn't have the humidity.
We were very lucky.
Yep.
Hey, everybody.
Hello, Rabbi.
We did not have I really did not. We had to go to Israel when we did. We had to go in June, middle of June, because we had teachers and students and people who needed to for school. But I was very worried about the temperature. We're very lucky. We got back and got everybody back safe. We had one small accident while we were there, which was unfortunate. One of our travelers, one of our friends, Jennifer Twitchell, broke her leg, unfortunately. A serious break, actually, but she made it. But luckily, it was on the last day of the trip. But she had to go to the hospital, which was something we've not had before on our trips. But overall, people were healthy and had a good time. And yeah, we got everybody back relatively, almost completely healthy. And then last week I was at church. I was doing a little talk for the Valencia United Methodist Church, which is where we'll be in 2 months for high holidays. So I had a chance to be with them and really nice people there. And they're doing a series of clergy, and they asked me to come in these 4 weeks. And I said, you know what, let's do it right away, because I don't want to start Deuteronomy and then miss a class and then start again. So that's why we weren't here last week. So I was back and got everybody back, like I said, and so we were there last week. And then tonight, actually, along those lines, I just came from the Performing Arts Center in Santa Clarita over at College of the Canyons, because they're doing the Fiddler on the Roof, which we're actually inviting people to come join us for the Sunday matinee in a week and a half or so. On the 30th, we're going to go to see that together, and the link is for any time to go. But who's playing Tevye? Reverend Andy from Valencia United Methodist Church. So I've been coaching him a little bit on playing Tevye, and he's really gotten into the role. And
Pretty impressive.
he's a really nice guy. And so He is a super nice guy. Some of you met him last year. I know you met him, Mike. He helped out with he actually ran the soundboard for a couple of the services at the church, just helping out, volunteered and helped out and actually was there and was super, super nice. He wore a yarmulke. He, got really into it. And now he's really into playing Tevye. Well, that's what I was going to say. No, I could play the Russian, but it was interesting because I gave them, they wanted a blessing. So I said, well, Rabbi, what's the blessing for community theater? I said the Shachiano. It was the only prayer I could really think was appropriate, but that's that famous line, keep the czar very far away. But I actually said to the people there, and I said, it's really a special story and it really resonates for us. Every family has a coming to America story. This one just happens to be Fiddler on the Roof, happens to be most of ours, right? Most of our families came from that area. But I said, right now, and right now, all eyes are on that area right now because that's being invaded by the Russians right now. So I said, maybe tonight we can also say, keep the modern Tsar, keep Tsar Putin very far away too. So it is pretty wild that same area is there. And it's just weird. Like I didn't say it to them, but I mean, think about it. Zelensky is a Jewish guy, which is crazy because Ukraine has a long history of anti-Semitism, which is a reality. He's a Jewish comedian, Jewish actor, who's now who's now president of the country. So the defense minister is Jewish. I mean, it's not just him. So he's it's a weird story. And it kind of, again, there is a history of anti-Semitism in Ukraine, but how can you argue, it's like, Putin's going around saying they're trying to denazify Ukraine. And you're like, Putin, hello, Zelensky's Jewish. The defense minister, Reznikov, is Jewish. It's just not true anymore. It was true. And it was very, very recently that Jews that lived there were worried about what would happen when Ukraine was free. We don't know. So Mike asked, how did Zelensky become president? We don't know. The crazy thing is he did a show called Servant of the People, which is about him becoming, about a teacher becoming president of Ukraine, when nobody can figure out how. And then life imitated art and he became I keep saying prime minister, he's president of Ukraine, but relatively free. I mean, more free than they are in Russia. There's yes, look, freer than it is in Hungary, freer than it is in other places. I mean, not everyone. Not sure. No. President. No.
Opposing political parties, because we did have opposing partisans jailed, like during the invasion.
Oh yeah, no, there's corruption there. I mean, he'll tell you there's corruption. So look, they have a prime minister too, right? It's not just the president. They have a prime minister that is also in charge of the government. There's a problem that there's not really a history of democracy in that area, but it's possible. There's a democratically elected government in Estonia. There's democratic elected governments in some parts of the former Soviet Union, but obviously we'll see what happens, and maybe what will come out of this will be acceleration towards democracy and towards liberalization of freedoms in those countries, but they don't have a history of them. Don't have a history. Correct. But don't forget, Turkey is a part of NATO and they've gone backwards. Hungary is a part of NATO and they've gone backwards. So we have countries that have slipped, but
Can I say also, because Russians don't exactly have a positive view of democracy. They were democratic for like a decade after the Soviet Union fell, and it was a very bad time.
yeah, well, the Russians experimented with democracy, but they still had a kleptocracy. And so everybody grabbed whatever they could. And the same thing happened in Ukraine. So we'll see what happens. But It is a,
That well is probably poisoned.
could be, but look, I'm not gonna give up on it. I'm not gonna give up on a part of the world that is too vital, too important for Europe and too important for what happens in the rest of the global relationship. So I'm not giving up on it. But I will tell you that that's what's been happening over the last couple of weeks. And we've been I wanted to get people into this next stage, this next book of Deuteronomy. It's actually perfect timing. It's perfect timing. We don't always have perfect timing, but this is perfect timing because as it so happens, this week, we start Devarim in the weekly Torah portion. So we've caught up to ourselves. What? Best book of the Torah. Of the 5 books, there's definitely some parts to this that I think you're going to really see. Some of it's very famous. Almost every week, we're going to read something in Deuteronomy that you know. Shema is in there. We're going to read that next week. We're going to read maybe the 10 Commandments today, depending on how far we go. We're going to see lines in this that you know very well. And when we think about the book of Deuteronomy, the 5th book of the Torah, the last book of the 5 books, it actually has quite a lot of the laws. So quite a lot of the halakha, the laws, are actually enumerated in this book. Actually, one of the chapters or one of the portions, Kitetse, has the most laws in any portion of the whole Torah. There's over 70 laws in that one portion, which we have 613 commandments. If 72 of them are in one portion, you can guess it's 10% are in one portion in Deuteronomy. And overall, quite a huge percentage of them are in the book of Deuteronomy. So Deuteronomy has a lot of the laws, a lot of and not only the laws that we can still keep, because Leviticus has a lot of laws, but it's about priesthood. It's about stuff we can't do anymore. Sacrifices and laws about, Tazria and Matzorah, skin diseases and things that aren't as applicable as they used to be. So Deuteronomy is definitely very relevant. I do want to say that as we start this book, when it's appropriate, we'll point out how it's different from other parts of the Torah, specifically, again, a version of something that's in, let's say, Exodus or Numbers, but it's also in Deuteronomy. And sometimes there's differences. Sometimes there are differences. So how do we account for those differences? How do we account for the differences in Deuteronomy versus Exodus or Numbers? Well, the easiest thing and the simplest answer is that it's written by a different author. And most people today, most biblical scholars agree that it was written by a different author. Traditional interpretation in Judaism wouldn't allow for that, right? It wouldn't allow for a different author. So as much as our sages understood that Deuteronomy was different, they simply said it's Moses's version of events. And so Moses's version of events is slightly different, and it's told not like Moses made it up, but this was Moses's vantage point. So when Moses sees something or hears something, it's different. Well, he dictated. He was dictated to him. He wrote it down, but he wasn't there during Genesis, and so God told him what happened in Genesis. He wasn't alive for his birth, and he wasn't alive for his death, so God dictated it to him. But Deuteronomy is for much of it, Moses is telling the people. It's a flashback, and it's a flashback that starts up pretty much 40 years before and goes all the way to the moment that they're at. And so just to remind people, we've talked about this before, we mentioned it when we started Numbers. 2 books of the Bible, Leviticus and Deuteronomy, take place in the same spot from the minute the book opens until the minute the book closes. There's no movement. Leviticus takes place at Mount Sinai. They get the laws of Leviticus at Mount Sinai, and they're there until the end of Leviticus. They don't move until Numbers. Deuteronomy begins just before the people are about to cross the land. They're in the modern nation of Jordan, in the area of Moab, the place right across from Jericho where they cross the Jordan River. And the moment that they open Deuteronomy to the moment they close Deuteronomy, that's where they are. So the book doesn't take place on the road. It doesn't take place in different locations. It takes place, or at least it's told from one place. Now, of course, there are places that are mentioned, and we do get taken to different places, and we get even taken back to Egypt in the book of Deuteronomy, but it's from the vantage point, it's from the perspective, it's from the memory of Moses. And it's definitely important because Moses essentially is telling the people, this is how you got to this place, because Moses and Joshua and Caleb are the last people alive that left Egypt, the last adults, let's say, alive, who remember Egypt, who remember that. And so he's telling the people what happened before. And so it's a flashback. The whole book really is a flashback. When you think about it, if you directed it, if you turn this into a movie, it would be a flashback. It would be somebody sitting there and telling you. Yep. So book number 3, Leviticus, doesn't move. Book number 5 doesn't move. And book number 1, Genesis, tells the story of how we got to Egypt. And so if you think about it, books 2 and 4, Exodus and Numbers, are the journey from Egypt to the desert. And around it, surrounding it, are these books, Genesis, Leviticus, and Deuteronomy. And if you think about that in a way, it kind of wraps the Exodus narrative around these stories. That being said, that means that the 5 books really are unified, or kind of the editorial decision, if you want to say, or again, the way God planned it. The story of the Exodus and how we got to this point is the purpose to some extent, or the narrative purpose of the 5 books. But surrounding it, 3/5 of it, 60% of it, are laws and perspectives and, if you will, what does it mean? And so it's almost as if you told a story about your life, and then, of course, you don't just tell people where you lived and what you did, but what you learned along the way. And in reality, that's the majority of it. The majority of it is, what did we learn along the way? What did we learn before we started the journey? What did we learn during the journey? And so a lot of it, if you think about it, a lot of the Torah takes place there. Last thing I want to say about Deuteronomy, as far as its place in the literature, is its place not even within the Torah, but within the Bible, is that we say that Deuteronomy, by we say, I say biblical scholars say, or historians say, that Deuteronomy was actually written probably during the time of Josiah, during the time of what we're reading about on Tuesday mornings, the Babylonian exile. And what was it written for? It was written with the purpose, the understanding, to explain to people how we got thrown out of our home. Because Deuteronomy, as we're going to see, is all about the covenant. It's all about the agreement that we make with God, the brit, that we are going to have this land, and this is what we have to do in order to stay in this land. And what happens is we have what's called a Deuteronomistic history, which starts in Deuteronomy and goes all the way to the end of Book of Kings. And it has some common words, it has some common language, some common vocabulary. And it also has, if we look at it that way, a common theme, which is that Deuteronomy tells us, warns us, and then by the end of the story, we understand how we got to the place where we got to, which is, you're about to lose this. So that is something to keep in mind too, that Deuteronomy, as much as it ends, puts a final chapter on the story of the Exodus and of our time with Moses, it also opens up and perhaps is the opening chapter of the story of our history from the time we come to the promised land to the time we get kicked out of the promised land. And that the foretelling or the foreshadowing, the warnings that we have in Deuteronomy were written by people who said, it's happening now. But keep that in mind. So that's where also this is a perfect time to do it, because as we're reading this in book of Jeremiah, which was also perhaps written by those same Deuteronomistic history people. Why? Similar language. Occasionally we'll show you where Deuteronomy and Jeremiah sound very similar. Book of Lamentations too, which we'll be reading next week. We'll talk about that next week, actually, when we read Lamentations, that these works were very important and were kind of telling the story of how we got to where we got to, both good and bad. So it's a good time to start. It's a good time to start on this journey, even though it's not a journey of distance. It's a journey of the mind and a journey into who we are. And so next Wednesday, we will be continuing that, but also reflect a little bit on Tisha B'Av, the destruction, which again is what we're reading about in Jeremiah. It is my birthday next week. So people said, well, are you going to go out for your birthday? I said, well, not at night, because it's Tisha B'Av, it's a fast day, and I ain't going to celebrate my birthday. So, yeah, so that's not going to happen anyways. So when it happens, thank you. When Tisha B'Av happens on my birthday, I celebrate my birthday on the Hebrew calendar, because my Hebrew calendar birthday is the 1st of Av, which technically was yesterday. But anyways, I'll celebrate it. We'll figure out a way to do it. But tonight is the last thing I say as we start. Tonight is actually my mom's yard site, so I want to dedicate studying tonight to her. 6 years since her passing on this anniversary on this yard site. So this is the year that she unfortunately passed was the day before my birthday, and we buried her on my birthday. So another way for me not to think about my birthday and being the time that she died was also to remember the yard site. As it happens. Yeah. Again, those are the way the dates play out. But on the Hebrew calendar, it's actually my birth date is my Jewish date is the 1st of Av. So it's always around the same time. It doesn't matter. The point is that you can look at different dates the way you want, but on the Hebrew calendar, this is her yard site tonight. So I think about her a lot, but tonight I definitely dedicate the study to her, and I think about again elevating her soul. So the words of Deuteronomy, and that's the words Eleha Devarim Asher Diber Moshe El Kol Yisrael. These are the words that Moses addressed to all Israel on the other side of the Jordan, through the wilderness in the Arava near Suf, between Paran, Tophel, Laban, Chatzerot, and Dizachab. It is in 11 days from Horeb to Kadesh Barnea by Mount Seir route. This is where Moses is when he says these words. The book of Deuteronomy takes place there in the desert, in Paran, or in that area. Yeah, I'm going to show it. What's so weird about this too, I will tell you this. I will tell you that I was there 2 weeks ago in Jordan. And I thought about it as I was in a place that they call Wadi Musa in Arabic, which is the river of Moses, though. And I thought about it because we don't know exactly where this spot was that they were at, but we do know this. I'm going to show you on this map. This is a good map for being able to see the route. So this is the route that they went out of Egypt and then came up through Sinai, and then they're in this area here, Kadesh Barnea. They cross over here, and this is where they are at the final place. So this is where they were when they had the incident of the spies, where they're not able to come in, and here's Arava. But here's the interesting thing. So here's Mount Sinai. Here's the desert, Kadesh Barnea. Here's where they are here. We don't know if that's Mount Sinai. No, we're not sure. That's why there's a question mark, right? A little question mark here. but it's in roughly in that region. This is all desert here. It's called the wilderness of Zin. This is called the Arava. This is the Jordan Rift Valley, which is this Rift Valley that the continental plates are being ripped apart right here. The Dead Sea is the result of that seismic shift. So here's where it's all taking place in this area. Now here's the weird thing. The Bible just reminded us it's 11 days from Horeb to Kadesh Barnea. That's 2 weeks, less than 2 weeks. That's how long it should have taken them to get to where they were coming to the promised land. It should have taken 2 weeks. Now they're a little further north, a little bit of a distance. But what happened? It was the 40th year on the first day of the 11th month that Moses addressed the Israelites in accordance with the instructions that Adonai had given them for them. So it's 40 years later. So those couple of weeks, it should have been turned into 40 years. So people say, well, maybe it was going to be 10 years, maybe it was going to be 20 years, maybe it was going to be 5 years. No, it was going to be 2 weeks. It was a 3-hour, it was 2 weeks, 10 days, 11 days, whatever. And it turned into 40 years. That's a tough journey because it wasn't a journey that was a matter of distance, right? Now it says, in a nice way, after he had defeated Sihon, king of the Amorites, who dwelt in Heshbon, and King Og of Bashan, who dwelt at Ashtaroth and Edrei. Now, just to again show you what we're talking about this area here. Talking about this area here that the Israelites conquered when they came in and they ended up fighting a war that they weren't even supposed to fight. Defeated people they weren't even supposed to defeat. But they wound up with land, as we read in the book of Numbers, on the other side of the Jordan River. As our tour guide in Israel pointed out, he did not point it out when he is in Jordan because Israeli tour guides are not allowed to guide people in Jordan. It's not allowed. So they are not allowed to come. Well, they're not allowed to lead the guide. They can be along for the ride, but they're not allowed to guide. It's very important to say, and our guide did say this in Israel, at no time in the biblical period, at no time during King David's time, at no time during King Herod's time after the biblical period, in the period of Jesus, at no time was the map of Israel ever like the map of Israel today. Never was it like that. Never was there a time when part of Israel or part of the promised land, so to speak, wasn't on the other side of the Jordan River too. The Jordan River has never been a border in history. Not in Jewish history, not in Turkish history, not in Roman history. It was never a border. It just wasn't. So here's what the country looked like when the tribes settled it. So they had 3 tribes, 2.5 tribes, as we know, right? Reuben, Gad, and half the tribe of Manasseh. Part of Manasseh was in Israel's side, and part of it was on the Jordan side. That's what it looked like. That's the Jordan River. So at no time was this a border. Never was. So it is today, but it wasn't. It never was in history. So that's how Israel wound up with that land, by defeating those kings. And here Moses says, on the other side of the Jordan River, in the land of Moab, Moses undertook to expound this teaching. And it says right here, the Torah Hazot, this teaching, he said, our God Adonai spoke to us at Horeb, which is the other name for Mount Sinai, saying, and again, one of the ways we know it's Deuteronomy is it calls it Horeb, not Sinai. Right? So you see, you know, when we say, you know, it was at Mount Sinai, we're just translating the word Horeb, but you know, it's Mount Sinai. You have stayed long enough at this mountain, at Mount Sinai. Start out and make your way to the hill country of the Amorites and to all their neighbors in the Arvah, the hill country, the Shephelah, the Negev, the seacoast, and the land of the Canaanites, and the Lebanon, as far as the great river, the river Euphrates. So even larger is the dimensions of Israel, the promised land, during the book of Deuteronomy, or the way the book of Deuteronomy spells it out, because it would have included Syria and Lebanon and a lot of Jordan, all the way to the river Euphrates. See, I place the land at your disposal. Go take possession of the land that Adonai swore to your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to assign to them and to their heirs after them. Thereupon I said to you, I cannot bear the burden of you by myself. Your God, Adonai, has multiplied you until you are today as numerous as the stars in the sky. May Adonai, the God of our ancestors, increase your numbers 1,000-fold and bless you as promised. So he says, Moses says right off the bat, you got too big. There's too many of you. How can I bear unaided the trouble of you and the burden and the bickering? So it's not just the numbers. It's also what comes along with it. And by the way, what's interesting here is, I just noticed for a moment, the word echa. How can I bear the unaided burden? Let me just see if they actually made a note, a commentary on the word echa right there. Yeah. Just see if there's no. So the word echa right there is actually the Hebrew word for a book that, again, we think the people who wrote Deuteronomy wrote, the book of Lamentations. Echa means, oh no, lamentation. So lamentation is right there, actually. I was looking to see if Rashi commented on the fact that that's the word that's used here. Echa. Oh no, how can I bear unaided the trouble of you? So what does Moses say? We know this scene from Exodus chapter 19, 18 and 19. Pick from each of your tribes candidates who are wise, discerning, and experienced, and I will appoint them as your heads. And you answered me and said, what you propose to do is good. So I took your tribal leaders, wise and experienced men, and appointed them over you, chiefs of thousands, chiefs of hundreds, chiefs of 50s, chiefs of tens, and officials for your tribes. I charged your magistrates at the time as follows: hear out your fellow Israelites and decide justly between one party and the other, be it for a fellow Israelite or a stranger. You shall not be partial in judgment. Hear out low and high alike. Fear neither party, for judgment is God's. And no matter, and any matter that is too difficult for you, then you can bring it. You shall bring it to me, and I will hear it. Now, what's interesting about that little tale that he just told us, that we read about in Exodus? Anybody remember from the book of Exodus? There's a critical thing missing from this little story right off the bat. Moses says here, I took your tribal leaders, right? I said, pick candidates, right? Right. Wise and discerning experience. That's not what the Bible in Exodus says happened. It's Yitro's idea, right? Jethro told him to do it. Jethro sees how hard the burden is to him and tells him, you got to take the burden off, right? It's his father-in-law's idea. That's why we call the portion Yitro, because Yitro comes in and saves the day. So here's a little bit of a difference. Moses doesn't say it was my father-in-law's idea here. He didn't say that here. Didn't say that here. It's a little different.
You have to go into who Yitro was.
I guess you give the guy credit. Clear. Well, because if somebody comes up with a good idea, it's nice to recognize it. No,
Not 40 years later.
I don't know. Come on. If somebody comes up, we still give Einstein credit for the theory of relativity 100 years later. I know, but it is interesting. It is interesting that he did. I know, but Moses doesn't, it's not Moses's idea. So somebody decided, or Moses decided, whatever you want to say, not to give credit to Yitro. It's an interesting thing. So, yeah, it's a weird thing. It's a weird missing thing. Now, again, you could say, well, he's streamlining the story, but really, would it really have taken that much time to say in 3 words? My father-in-law's idea. Anyways, he didn't. By the way, it could be that the person who wrote Deuteronomy did not want to give the Midianites credit for it. That's a possibility. Yes. Not even that he wasn't Jewish, that he specifically was Midianite. So we set out from Horeb and traveled the great and terrible wilderness that you saw along the road to the hill country of the Amorites, as our God Adonai had commanded us. When we reached Kadesh Barnea, I said to you, you have come to the hill country of the Amorites, which our God Adonai is giving to us. See, your God Adonai has placed the land at your disposal. Go up and take possession, as Adonai, the God of your fathers, promised you. Fear not and be not dismayed. Right? Al tira, al techat. Don't be upset. You know what happens. Then all of you came to me and said, let us send agents, or let us send, well, again, men. Let us send anashim. Let us send agents ahead of us, spies, right? To reconnoiter the land for us and bring back word on the route we shall follow and the cities we shall come to. So here's the incident of the spies, which we read about in Shlach Lecha, chapter 12 of Numbers. Here, it doesn't say that God said to send the spies. Here it says that you came to me and asked to send the spies. It's different. I'm not going to go back and show it to you right now. Just take my word for it right now, that in Numbers it says, God said, send people. Now, how do the rabbis deal with this? This is a perfect example of how they deal with a contradiction. They deal with the contradiction this way, which it says that the Deuteronomy adds a part of the story that we don't have in Numbers, which is that God didn't want to send the spies. God was responding to this incident where the people said, send spies. Why? Because God didn't need the people to have a doubt about it. The only reason you send spies is if you doubt that what God said, like God doesn't know what's going on there. So this is why people have kind of synthesized these stories to be that God said, okay, fine, send spies. But God kind of knows that once they want to send spies, it's already over. They're doomed because no matter what, they don't have faith. So let's read Moses' version of the events. By the way, it's interesting that it went right from being at Mount Sinai, being on the journey, to this scene. Now, I promise you it's going to go back, because otherwise we skipped 12 chapters of Numbers, and we skipped pretty much, if you will, everything. Well, even if we weren't saying there's distance covered in Leviticus, I mean, we just skipped a whole lot of stuff. I promise you'll go back. That he'll take us back. It's not chronological. I approved of the plan. So I selected from among you 12 participants, one representative from each tribe. That's also Moses taking credit for the plan. Right? Not that God did, but I did. They made out for the hill country, came to the Wadi Eshcol and spied it out. And they took some of the fruit of the land with them and brought it down to us. And they gave us this report. It is a good land that our God Adonai is giving to us. Yet you refused to go up and flouted the command of your God Adonai. You sulked in your tents and said, is it out of hatred for us that Adonai brought us out of the land of Egypt to hand us over to the Amorites to wipe us out? What kind of place are we going to? Our brothers have taken the heart out of us, saying, we saw there a people stronger and taller than we, large cities with walls sky high. and even Anakites. Now, this is very close to the description that we have in Numbers, but it's not quite that. And in some ways, the description in Numbers is even scarier because they actually say that the Anakites are giants, right? So this says the people are stronger and taller than us. Could even be translated. Mary, what does the King James say for? Yeah, it's not even necessarily even stronger, but taller than us. So, but they are called Anakites here too. And you know, this is pretty close to what they said, which is it's a beautiful land, but we're going to get killed if we try to go there. And of course, what's the effect? I said to you, have no fear, dread or fear of them, which by the way, in Numbers, Moses doesn't do. It's Caleb and Joshua that say, don't listen to these guys. Here, Moses is taking credit for this. Moses does say, don't do this, don't give up, but it was Joshua and Caleb who said, do the right thing. None other than your God Adonai goes before you, will fight for you, just as God did for you in Egypt before your very eyes. And in the wilderness where you saw how God Adonai carried you as a householder carries his son, like as a dad carries his son, his boy, all the way that you traveled until you came to this place. Yet for all that, you have no faith in your God Adonai, who goes before you on your journeys to scout the place where you are to encamp, in fire by night and in cloud by day, in order to guide you on the route you are to follow. God is literally leading you by a pillar of fire and cloud. That's God. There's God's right there with you. God's not going to take you to a dangerous place. You don't have to worry about scouts. You've got God as your scout. Adonai heard your loud complaint and becoming angry vowed, not one of those involved, this evil generation shall see the good land that I swore to give to your fathers. None except for Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, he shall see it. And to him and his descendants, I will give land on which he set foot, because he has remained loyal to Adonai. Because of you, Adonai was incensed with me too, saying, you shall not enter it either. You're jumping the gun. Don't worry. Don't worry. Joshua, son of Nun, who attends you, he shall enter it. Imbue him with strength, for he shall allot it to Israel. Now, what's weird about the way that scene goes down is it's very close to the scene from Numbers. It's very close. It's not like it's totally different. But Moses, number one, takes credit for stuff that really he doesn't say he did in Numbers, right? It doesn't say that Moses was quite as proactive as he is here. And what else did Moses just say here, which doesn't say in Numbers? Because of you, Adonai was incensed with me, saying, you shall not enter it either. Well, that's not what Numbers said, right? Numbers said it's because he doesn't say, God says you struck the rock instead of speaking to it, and you and Aaron won't be able to come in. Now, in this version, and by the way, this version makes sense. It's not like it doesn't make sense. If of the two things, not keeping the people in line and basically being lumped in with them together, which is what happens here, versus Moses striking a rock and losing his temper and hitting a rock one time, this one makes more sense. Just saying. This one actually makes more sense. But in this one, Moses is definitely laying the blame on the people. Here, he has no culpability other than, I should have done a better job leading you. I should have helped you get over that hump of not having faith, maybe. But basically, he's saying, I got lumped in with you. I don't get to come in. What's weird is that it doesn't say that Joshua is one of the spies. It doesn't even say Caleb was one of the spies. You almost have to know that part of the story in order to get that. But Joshua and Caleb really aren't given the role of being the good spies as they are in the number story. So it definitely de-accentuates that. It doesn't really say that they were good to the two good spies in that. So Moses gets lumped in with them, and the spies kind of get, it doesn't really get explained why Joshua and Caleb get a pass, earned that, right? They earned that. They earned that trip. So it doesn't exactly explain it, but it's close enough. I mean, it's not like a completely different story, but it's a version of it, if you will. It's almost a condensed version of it, which makes more sense if you knew the earlier story from Numbers. So Joshua is Moses' assistant, and it seems like that's why he gets to go in, because he's been working with Moses, not even that he was a spy. But here's what it says. Moreover, your little ones, who you said would be carried off, your children who did not yet know good from bad, they shall enter it. To them will I give it, and they shall possess it. So the kids that you said were going to get taken away, ironically, they're the ones who are going to enter the land, and you won't. Your kids will. But again, these kids didn't know any better. That's an interesting phrase. They didn't know better. They're going to get it. As for you, turn about and march into the wilderness by the way of the Sea of Reeds. You replied to me, saying, we stand guilty before Adonai. We will go up now and fight, just as our God Adonai commanded us. And the men among you girded yourselves with war and recklessly started for the hill country. That is in the Torah. In the book of Numbers, we read about the people deciding to do it anyways. No, we're going to do it. Sorry, God. We'll take it back. We're going to go in and we'll do it. Adonai said to me, warn them, do not go up and fight. Do not fight, since I'm not in your midst, else you will be routed by your enemies. I spoke to you, but you would not listen. You flouted Adonai's command and willfully marched into the hill country. And the Amorites who lived in those hills came out against you like so many bees, and they chased you, and they crushed you at Hormah in Seir. Again, you wept before Adonai, but Adonai would not hear your cry and give ear to you. And that is the story of what happened in Hormah. Very similar to what happened in Numbers. People had to learn the hard way that when God says, I gave you a chance, screwed up, you better listen. Thus, after you remained at Kadesh all that long time, you marched back into the wilderness by the way of the Sea of Reeds, as Adonai had spoken to me, and skirted the hill country of Seir a long time. Now, you notice that that verse is seen by the Christian scholars as part of the previous chapter. You could end it there. But when we look at that phrase, it really does go, it makes sense that it's part of that same idea. It's a long sentence. Maybe, again, that's a sentence, but it could also be, again, part of a longer issue, which is that you went from Kadesh and then you marched back towards, you march back towards Egypt, which again, to keep in mind what that looked like. Yeah. Came up this way, and then you went back down this way, and went back there. Now the Sea of Reeds, the Red Sea, is down here. It's here and it's here. It's, can't see the cursor. There it is. It's here. That's this Red Sea, and that's the Red Sea here. So
It's not necessarily the Red Sea. We don't.
correct. We don't know. But they definitely marched away from the promised land at that point. They came up here to Kadesh Barnea. From here, they came here and then they came back down. So again, this area is where they are for the next 40 years. This area is where they spend their time, outside the land of Israel. It's basically the Arava desert. That's the Arava desert, or the Negev desert. And there's no real difference between, I mean, they're desert. Like, it's not like you go, oh, I just moved into another desert. It's all desert, and it is dirty, hot, dusty. There's not a lot to see there. And there's no difference between this Jordanian side and the Israel side. They look exactly the same. They are very, very low. When you're here in the Arava, you're 1,000 feet below. No, you're 1,000 feet below sea level. You are very dry, and it is not a fun place to be. I don't like to be there in a car or in a bus. It's like Death Valley. It's very spiritual, but it's dangerous. So here's what happens. Adonai said to me, you've been scurrying this hill country long enough. Now turn north and charge the people as follows. You will be passing through the territory of your kin, the descendants of Esau. So this is now 40 years later, who live in Seir. Though they will be afraid of you, be very careful not to provoke them. I will not give of their land so much as a foot you can tread on. I have given the hill country of Seir as a possession to Esau. So that's the Edomites' country. We don't want to give them, we're not going to have any problems with them. That's your cousin. Those are your cousins, right? What food you eat, you shall obtain from them for money. Even the water you drink, you shall procure from them for money. Indeed, your God Adonai has blessed you in all your undertakings. God has watched over your wanderings through this great wilderness. Your God Adonai has been with you these past 40 years. You've lacked nothing. So again, you've been in the desert, you've been in the wilderness, you've been outside of an area where you could pasture flocks and have a life and build homes. But God's taking care of you. We then moved on away from our kin, the descendants of Esau who live in Seir, away from the road of Arava, away from Elat and Etzion Gever, which is again Elat, right down there at the bottom of the Sea of Reeds. I mean, that's why when we talk about like where we were, the Sea of Reeds, at least at one point we were there at Elat. Okay. And we marched in the direction of the wilderness of Moab. So again, to take you back to the map, that's marching back north from here. Here's Etzion Gever, Elat. This is Israeli port. Jordanian side here is Aqaba. Saudi Arabia is here. Egypt is here. Right here, 4 countries come together within 10 miles of each other. All these countries are right here. They meet right here, Aqaba. So Israel starts marching back up here through Edom, through Moab. They're in this area, and that's where just about where we are in this part. Moses is still telling the people as you're marching through there, Adonai said to me, do not harass the Moabites or provoke them to war, for I will not give you any of their land as possession. I've assigned Ar as a possession to the descendants of Lot. It was formerly inhabited by the Emim, a people great and numerous, as tall as the Anakites. So according to this, there were people that lived there before the Moabites. Interesting. I've heard about these people before. Like the Anakites, they're counted as Rephaim, but the Moabites call them Emim. I mean, like, we're supposed to know this stuff. Similar, Seir was formerly inhabited by the Horites, but the descendants of Esau dispossessed them, wiping them out and settling in their place, just as Israel did in the land they were to possess, which Adonai had given to them. And that's weird because that's anachronistic. Hasn't happened yet. Hasn't happened yet. It hasn't happened. It's going to happen. It happened maybe by the time they wrote this, but that's a little slip.
Yeah.
But what's the purpose of this? It's to tell us that the Moabites, the Edomites, and also, by the way, the Ammonites, all dispossessed people as well. So what is this saying is that just as Israel took possession of a land and dispossessed people there, so did they. And God allowed it. God said it's theirs. And God told the Israelites, don't step on their territory. It's theirs. I'm not going to give it to you. It's theirs. Now, we know the Moabites freaked out, right? They hired Balaam and tried to curse us, and they flipped out when we went through their territory. But they had no reason to. At least according to this, God made it very clear, that's not your area. They didn't, but they also assumed the worst of us. Up now, cross the Wadi Zered. So we crossed the Wadi Zered. That time we spent in the travel from Kadesh Barnea until we crossed the Wadi Zered was 38 years until that whole generation of warriors had perished from the camp. So that's, again, most of the time, the exception of 2 years, most of the time was in that area. From Kadesh Barnea to that place, that's where they lived for most of the 40 years in that small area. So the idea that they're wandering all the way through the desert and, you know, we're in Egypt and this and that, and the journey took them 40 years. It didn't. The Torah is really clear, both in Numbers and in here, that most of the time was spent in the wilderness outside, just outside the land of Israel, in the area between what is today the Negev Desert, was the Arava Desert, which Jordan and Israel, and almost totally uninhabited places to this day. Almost totally, not even Bedouins live out there. Nobody lives out there. There's no water. There's no green stuff. It is the desert. It is really the desert. So the whole generation of warriors had perished from the camp, as Adonai had sworn concerning them. Indeed, the hand of Adonai struck them to root them out from the camp until they were finished off. And here it says they didn't even really just die of old age. God kind of pushed them out. I mean, God made sure they died. And this goes along with the tradition that, in fact, every year on the anniversary of this horrible day, the day of the spies, that every day for 40 years, 2% of the population died. It's an interesting tradition, right? Every year on the anniversary of the spies, the people laid down, all the men laid down in graves, and 2% of them didn't wake up. What's so interesting about that? According to the Mishnah, that day is next week. Tisha B'Av. The first calamity that happened on the 9th of Av was the 12 spies. Yep. And there's an interesting quote from the Midrash that says, you cried out on that day for no reason. I'll give you a reason to cry. In the future, that'll be the day you cry. And what are the other things that happen according to the Mishnah on that day? The first temple was destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar. The second temple was destroyed by the Romans 600 years later. This is according to the Mishnah. The Romans subsequently crushed Bar Kokhba's revolt and destroyed the city of Beitar 60 years after that in 135, right? The second revolt, or second major revolt. There were many other revolts, but the second other major revolt killed maybe again 500,000 Jews. And then there was another revolt. And what happened after the Bar Kokhba revolt was done? Rufus, Quintus Tineius Rufus, plowed the site of the temple because people didn't stop fighting the Romans. Even with Bar Kokhba's fall at Beitar, they didn't stop fighting. And they didn't stop fighting outside of Israel either, because there was revolts against the Romans. Jewish were fought against the Romans in Alexandria, and they fought against the Romans in other parts of the empire. They didn't give up. But we have other traditions, things that happen on Tisha B'Av. The first crusade, according to tradition, started on August 15th, 1096. 10,000 Jews were killed in its first month in the Rhineland, in France and Germany, area around Metz and Speyer. Jews were expelled from England in 1290, right? Were not allowed back until the 1600s. Jews were expelled from France on this day in 1306, about 16 years later. And then the very famous expulsion from Spain on Tisha B'Av 1492, July 31st, right? Germany entered World War I, on August 1st, 1914, which again is somewhat connected, obviously, to the Holocaust. And in 1941, according to tradition, the final solution went into effect on the 2nd of August, 1941. Warsaw Ghetto, deportations to Treblinka. I mean, they were stuff all the time. And then not almost on that day in 1994, 85 people were killed in Buenos Aires when Iranian terrorists bombed a Jewish community center in Buenos Aires, the Amia Center. And again, some people now say the disengagement from Gaza started around Tisha B'Av too. Yeah, we don't mourn the Holocaust on Tisha B'Av. We have a special date to remember it, Yom HaShoah. But we do have some things connected to the Holocaust on Tisha B'Av. So these are all things that happened around the 9th of Av. So the first, though, was this incident of the spies. According to tradition, that happened on Tisha B'Av. Do we know for a fact? No, we don't. But according to our tradition, that was the first calamity that happened on that day. So it was a bad anniversary. It's a bad anniversary for us. When all the warriors among the people had died off, Adonai spoke to me, saying, "You are now passing through the territory of Moab through Ar. You will then be close to the Ammonites. Do not harass them or start a fight with them. For I will not give you any part of the land of the Ammonites to you as possession. I've assigned it as a possession to the descendants of Lot, because like Moab and Ammon are the descendants of Lot with his daughters." Yes, a very problematic part of the book of Genesis is that, yeah, try teaching that to kids. It too is counted as Rephaim country. It was formerly inhabited by Rephaim, who the Ammonites called Zamzumim, a people great and numerous and as tall as Anakites. Adonai wiped them out. So the Ammonites dispossessed them and settled in their place, as God did for the descendants of Esau who live in Seir by wiping out the Horites before them. So they dispossessed them and settled in their places. This is the case, still the case. So you can see that the traditions of the Ammonites and Moabites and the Edomites are respected by our Torah. They have a claim to it. God gave it to them. God gave them a land too.
This says that God is not just the God of Israel.
And has a role to play in the dispossession of a land, at least if it's according to God's plan. So, must have been God. That's what it says. So too with the Avim, who dealt in the villages in the vicinity of Gaza, the Kaphtorim, who came from Crete, wiped them out and settled in their place. Philistines. The Philistines. They didn't come from this area. They live around Gaza. They live on the coast. They come from Kaphtor, right? Come from Crete. That's what it says. All right? The Kaphtorim. Kaphtor, it actually says from Crete, but it says Kaphtor. The Kaphtorim from Kaphtor. But Kaphtor is Crete. Came there and they got a place. God must have wanted them to have it. Set up across the Wadi Arnon. See, I give into your power Sichon, the Amorite king of Heshbon, and his land, begin the occupation, engage him in battle. This day I will begin to put the dread and fear of you upon the peoples everywhere under heaven, so that they shall tremble and quake because of you whenever they hear you mentioned. Then I sent messengers from the wilderness of Kedemoth to King Sichon of Heshbon with an offer of peace as follows. Let me pass through your country. I will keep strictly to the highway, turning neither to the right nor to the left. What food I eat, I will supply with for money, and what water I drink, you will furnish for money. Just let me pass through. I'll pay you for it. As the descendants of Esau who dwell in Seir did for me, and the Moabites who dwell in Ar, that I may cross the Jordan into the land that Adonai our God is giving us. And that's not what happened. We just read in Numbers that they didn't do that. They freaked out. The Moabites freaked out and hired Balaam when we did that. Now, that's not what this says. This basically says that we were okay until we got to Sihon and Og, until we got to those areas, then it got bad. But it got bad while we were crossing these lands. These people were not nice to us, according to the book of Numbers. So what happened? And it could be, again, by the time of Deuteronomy, there's a different take on that. There's a different take on the relationship that we have with those people. But it's not what the book of Numbers said.
It almost seems like the writers.
I think there's definitely, if you want to say a more positive, look, already we see that Moses is the one who's doing this, right? We see Moses being the one who's making this stuff happen. But there is this idea that, well, I would like to say it this way. The stories are similar enough that it's not like they didn't have these stories in their mind the way that it happened. I mean, they're a little different, but they're not that different. I mean, they're different in the sense that, well, did they let them cross or not? Did we pay for them or not? I mean, that's a little different, but at least it says that we crossed through there. Whether or not it was as good of a relationship, it's a little different, but still pretty close. So I would say this, the traditions, I think, were pretty accepted. I think they were pretty well known. I don't think that because there's slightly different versions of it, that it means it didn't happen. It's much more likely that it did happen and there's slightly different remembrances of the way it happened. And it's not really that different. I mean, okay, I guess if you're an Ammonite or Moabite, if you're remembered as a bad person or remembered as a good person, it could make a difference. But it's pretty close.
But did the top ones, or you mentioned ones that the writers at one time thought that we would only be reading Deuteronomy.
Yeah.
Not the other.
Yeah, I was going to just say that. The idea that we would read both of them back to back, I don't think that was ever a question. I don't think they ever thought that was going to be the case. I think the people who had Deuteronomy, who commissioned it, who wrote it, never thought you'd read the book of Numbers. And if that's the case, yeah, it's a little different. I don't think it's that different. I mean, you go, wow, Moses really did a lot. But aside from that, the story pretty much, now, we've skipped over some stuff, but I promise you we're going to go back to it. Because right now we've got literally from Numbers, from the spies to the end of the book. There's nothing, we skipped everything. And we've skipped over a lot of Exodus, but we're going to come back, trust me. So, but here, King Sichon of Heshbon refused to let us pass through because Adonai had stiffened his will and hardened his heart in order to deliver him into your power, as is now the case. And of course, that sounds a whole like Pharaoh. That's the same words. Stiffened his heart, hardened his heart, stiffened his will. All of those words that we see. Metzet levavo. Yep, slightly different, little different language, but pretty close to the same, which is I made it so he couldn't do the right thing. And Adonai said to me, see, I begin by placing Sichon and his land at your disposal. Begin the occupation, take possession of his land. Sichon with all his troops took field against us at Yachaz, and our God Adonai delivered him to us, and we defeated him and his sons and all his troops. At the time, we captured all his towns, and we doomed every town, men, women, and children, leaving no survivor. We retained as booty only the cattle and the spoil of the cities that we captured. Now, that's very close to what we read in Numbers, except in the book of Numbers, it says that they kept the young girls that had not known a man, but it's still pretty decisively genocidal. This is the first war that we fight in the capture of the land. It happens outside of Israel on the Jordanian side. This is the first battle. And it's to some extent, as you can see, preliminary battle. It's the, let's see how this is going to go. It's a little bit of a warm-up. And well, let's see what happens. From Aroer, on the edge of the Arnon Valley, including the town in the valley itself, to Gilad, not a city was too mighty for us. Our God, Adonai, delivered everything to us. And again, to just show you what we're talking about, this is where we get a slightly different look at these lands here, which are parts of Ammon and Moab. What would be Ammon and Moab are under our control right here. So here's where their property is. Their line would be here, Ammon and Moab, and we wind up with this area here. Again, it tells us we're not supposed to take any land from them, but these areas here are very close to where Ammon and Moab are. So these cities are oftentimes listed as Ammonite and Moabite cities. So there is kind of a sense that what's really going on here too is you're real close. You did not encroach upon the land of the Ammonites all along the Wadi Yabok and the towns of the hill country, just as our God Adonai had commanded us. So that's how we wound up with those places. And we didn't encroach on their territory. We made our way up the road toward Bashan. King Og of Bashan with all his troops took field against us at Edrei. But Adonai said to me, do not fear him, for I'm delivering him and all his troops and his country into your power. And you will do to him as you did to Sichon, king of Amorites, who lived at Heshbon. And so our God, and again, so he's a little farther north, King Og. So our God Adonai also delivered into our power King Og of Bashan with all his troops, and we dealt such a blow that no survivor was left. At the time we captured all his towns, there was not a town that we did not take from him. 60 towns, the whole district of Argov, the kingdom of Og in Bashan. All those towns were fortified with high walls and gates and bars, apart from a great number of unwalled towns. So these are those areas that we wound up with. We doomed them as we had done in the case of King Sichon of Heshbon. We doomed every town, men, women, and children, and retained as booty all the cattle and the spoils of the town. Thus we seized at that time from the two Amorite kings the country beyond the Jordan, from the Wadi Arnon to the Mount Hermon. Sidonians call Hermon Sirion, and the Amorites call it Senir. This is the mountain in the north, which is still far northern boundary of Israel. And Mount Hermon is still the last and only place in Israel, far north you can go, where you can go skiing. It is the only ski resort in Israel. And there was snow on Mount Hermon even when we were there 3 weeks ago. You could see it in the distance. So this is Mount Hermon. Most of Mount Hermon is actually in, most of it is in Syria. So even though part of it is, is a ski place, actually most of the area of Mount Hermon is not in. Here, I'll show you what it looks like. This is the. It's not a lot. It's not very big, but this is what it looks like. Smaller than Mountain High, but this is about as much snow as you can get in Israel. So this is what it looked like in the winter. So yeah, but much of the mountain behind it is actually in Syria. And so if you think about that being the northern boundary, the Golan Heights, that's the Golan Heights, folks. I mean, that is the Mount Hermon was part of the Golan Heights that Israel captured in 1967. Mount Hermon is going to continue to be, and as we were there a couple weeks ago, continue to be a very important part of Israel's defense, so that they don't give up that higher ground, which would allow the Syrians to come into the country. So just to show you where it is today, here's the northern part of Israel. This is like the furthest northern towns, and you can go all the way up to Mount Hermon up here. But as you can see, for Harvey and for those who were with us this last trip, we had lunch here at Majd el-Shams, which is a Druze city, Druze village. We had lunch there. And that's about the closest we were to Mount Hermon, which is up here. But Mount Hermon, most of Mount Hermon is actually all the way back here in Syria. And you can see that this whole area up here is the way, way far northern part of Israel. So yeah. So that is the map today. This is the border. This is the border of Israel. And yeah, for the most part, once you're here, this is all Syria. This is Lebanon up here. So it's a very important part of the region, and it's where the water melts off of Mount Hermon and goes into the Jordan River. So that is the area. So let's go into let's go after we conquered the land. All the towns of the tableland and the whole of Gilad and Bashan, as far as Salca and Edrei, the towns of Og's kingdom in Bashan. Only King Og of Bashan was left of the remaining Rephaim. His bedstead and iron bedstead is now in Rabbah of the Ammonites. It is 9 cubits long and 4 cubits wide by the standard of a cubit. Why is his bed described here? Well, it seems to be that Og is a pretty large guy himself, right? It says 9 cubits long would be about 13 feet, and it's about 6 feet wide. So it's a pretty big bed. Yeah. So he's a very tall guy, I guess. And it's made of iron too, which would be very heavy. Very strong to support a very large guy. And this is the land which we apportioned at that time, the part from Auror along the Wadi Arnon, which part of the hill country of Gilad and its towns, I assigned to the Reubenites and the Gadites. The rest of Gilad and all Bashan under Og's rule, the whole Argov district, all that Bashan, which is called Rephaim country, I assigned to half tribe of Manasseh. As we showed you on the map, that's how the tribes got there. Yair, son of Manasseh, received the whole Argov district, that is Bashan, as far as the boundary of the Geshurites and the Makathites, and they named it after himself, right? Havot Yair, as is still the case. Havot Yair means the towns, right? The villages of Yair. So that's what Havot Yair means. So to Machir, I assigned Gilad. And to the Reubenites and the Gadites, I assigned the part of Gilad down to the Wadi Arnon, the middle of the Wadi being the boundary, and up to the Wadi Yabok, the boundary of the Ammonites. So the Ammonites get from the Wadi Yabok, that river is their boundary for the Ammonites. But you can see that the Golan Heights, according to the Bible, is part of Israel, interestingly. It wasn't that Israel decided that they were going to conquer it during the war, the 67 war, it was the area that Syria attacked them from. So, yeah. So that is the Golan Heights. It's part of the biblical land of Israel, all the way back to this part. We also see the Arava from the slopes of Pisgah on the east to the edge of the Jordan, and from the Kinneret down to the sea of Arava, the Dead Sea. That is the Jordan Valley. That is the entire Jordan Valley, both sides of the Jordan. From the Kinneret, right? From the Sea of Galilee all the way down to the Dead Sea. At that time I charged you, men of Reuben, Gad, and Manasseh, saying, your God Adonai is giving you this country to possess. You must go as shock troops, warriors at the head of your Israelite kin. We heard those lines. Go and fight with the Israelites. Then you can come back and settle the land. It's exactly what we heard in the book of Numbers. That same thing. Reuben, Gad, and Manasseh have to fight with the rest of the troops, and then they can come back. Only your wives, children, and livestock. I know that you have much livestock shall be left in the towns which I have assigned you. That was a whole discussion that we had in Numbers just a few weeks ago. Those tribes wanted to make sure they had enough land for their flocks. And here it says it. Until Adonai has granted your kin a haven such as you have, and they too have taken possession of the land that your God Adonai is assigning them beyond the Jordan, then you may return each to the homestead that I have assigned to him. So fight with the people, the rest of the tribes, and you can go back and settle. You already got your land, I know, but you can't settle it until we finish this job. I also charged Joshua at the time, saying, you have seen with your own eyes all that your God Adonai has done to these two kings. So shall Adonai do to all the kingdoms into which you shall cross over. So what's going to happen across Canaan. Do not fear them, for it is your God Adonai who will battle for you. Now this is where the portion ends. It's not where the chapter ends. So Ve'er Hanan starts here. Now, at least the way we looked at the chapters, or the way we break it, is that ends an idea. Let's see, we'll read a little bit more now. We'll read into this chapter, or into this portion. Ve'er Hanan begins, Ve'er Hanan, I pleaded, that's what the word Ve'er Hanan, I pleaded for mercy, I pleaded for grace with Adonai at that time, saying, O Lord Adonai, you who let your servant see the first works of your greatness and your mighty hand, you whose powerful deeds no God in heaven or earth can equal. Let me, I pray, cross over and see the good land on the other side of the Jordan, that good hill country in the Lebanon. But Adonai was wrathful with me on your account, and would not listen to me. And Adonai said to me, enough, never speak to me of this matter again. So here's an interesting part of Deuteronomy, which it says that Moses did not give up. Once God said you can't cross over, Moses asked again. In the Midrash, goes even further, that Moses did not ask once. He asked over and over and over again. Now, the Midrash and the totality of the story always brings up the fact that Moses didn't listen to God and struck the rock instead of speaking to it. But here, Moses once again repeats that it's because of you that I don't get to come in. It's because of you people that I don't get to come in. So he does not take responsibility for it. In all fairness, you could understand why, from Moses' standpoint, he doesn't see it that way. What's interesting is if we didn't have the book of Numbers, we never would have known this. We would have never known that there's another part of that story. Now, Moses, to some extent, is just telling you what he felt, which is he lost it. And you can understand why he lost it, but he's still blaming the people for the fact that he lost it. And again, it's true. They caused him to lose his patience. But what's interesting is that God now loses patience with Moses and says, don't say it anymore. Again, according to the Midrash, he doesn't stop. He's begging God until his last moment. Maybe God will change his mind. All Moses wants to do is enter the promised land. That's all he wants to do. He says to God in the Midrash, let me be a bug. Don't even, no one will know. Don't even have me go in as Moses. I'll go in disguise. Yeah, but there's one thing of it, seeing it. There's another thing of being there and experiencing it himself. That's all he wants to do. He doesn't want the virtual experience. He wants to be there. So, go up to the summit of Pisgah and gaze about to the west, to the north, south, and east. Look at it well, for you shall not go across yonder Jordan. So, you can look at it. Now here, it almost seems like God says, just look at it. Later on, we're going to get a little bit more description of this, but you're not going over. Give Joshua his instructions and imbue him with strength and courage, for he shall go across as the head of the people, and he shall allot to them the land that you may only see. Now that's a pretty harsh way of telling him again, you're not going to. Meanwhile, we stayed on in the valley near Beth Peor. Now, this is a little out of order, but we're going to finish with this today, this section. We're going to get to why does this section exist here, and why was it carried over from Numbers? And now, O Israel, give heed to the laws and rules that I'm instructing you to observe, so that you may live to enter and occupy the land that Adonai, the God of your fathers, is giving you. And this is why chapter 4 begins like this, because now Moses is going to get to the point, which is, I'm going to give you the laws and the rules. And what does he say now? And now, O Israel, give heed. V'ata Yisrael Shema. And this is a phrase that we get over and over and over again in Deuteronomy. Shema. Listen, which they translate as give heed. That's fine. But I'm going to point out to you in Hebrew when we get to it, because it's going to happen a lot. And these phrases, that you may live in the land that God has given you. We're going to see these phrases come up and over and over and over again in Deuteronomy. Now, here's what it says. You shall not add anything to what I command you, or take anything away from it, but keep the commandments of your God Adonai, that I may enjoin upon you. Now, that's right at the beginning. You shall not add or take away anything from it. Now, this is one of the reasons why people are very careful not to mess with the Torah. We can't change it. We can't abridge it. We can't update it. We can't make, we can't just cut out something. We can't say, well, that's a scribal error. Can't do it. So we take it very seriously. Now, what's really interesting is this is a super important line from the Torah. You shall not add or take away anything from it. And why is this so important? Well, it's really important for Christians because there's a real question right here. This is when Jesus gives the very famous Sermon on the Mount, the Beatitudes. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. You know that part. Blessed are the peacemakers. You're the salt of the earth. These beautiful lines, right? These are beautiful lines in the Christian Bible, right? A light to the world. By the way, very similar lines that we have in the Torah. But here's a really, really powerful line that comes right from the book of Deuteronomy. Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets, which, by the way, means the Torah or the rest of the Tanakh as they had it at that time, right? The prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For I truly tell you, until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter nor the stroke of a pen will by any means disappear from the law until everything is accomplished. Jesus and Matthew just told the people, the law doesn't change. Now, how does it change? You know it changes. It changed. Really changed. Really changed. There's a reason why Christians don't keep Shabbat anymore. Well, here's the loophole. Until everything is accomplished. Now, you and I could read that going, well, there's stuff we got to do, right? Got to fix the world. Again, everything is accomplished. I mean, nothing's ever going to ever be really accomplished. It says right here, until it is accomplished. For Christians, it's accomplished by Jesus's death and resurrection. So when Jesus is accomplishes that, now the law doesn't have to be followed anymore. So it doesn't seem like that's what he's saying, that it's my death that will end the law. Because what he's really telling his followers here, anyone who sets aside one of the least of these commands and teaches others accordingly will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever practices and teaches these commands will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I tell you that unless your righteousness surpasses that of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, you will certainly not enter the kingdom of heaven. So he's telling his followers, unless you're keeping the Torah like the rabbis, who were the Pharisees, you're not going to heaven. Now, it doesn't seem like he's saying that for, and by the way, that's in effect for another year. Seems like he's talking about it for a long time. So that is an interesting take on that line that we just read. So the way Jesus told it is even more powerful to some extent. He went even further because he says not the stroke of a pen, right? Not the smallest letter. The King James says in chapter 5, not a jot nor tittle. It's kind of a weird phrase. But in Hebrew, he would have said not a yud or the dot under the yud. Why the yud? Because it's the smallest letter. The smallest letter is the yud. And it's the letter that can easily most be taken away. And he says not a yud and not even a dot under the yud. So here's a yud and here's a dot under a yud. A dot or a yud doesn't come out of the Torah. It says right here, you're not supposed to add or commit. He told his followers, we're not going to do that. Well, they They changed it. But that's why he said it. Because the Torah says very clearly in the Torah itself, don't change it. And he's telling his followers, yeah, don't change it. And don't even change a letter. He knew. So, you saw with your own eyes what Adonai did in the matter of Baal Peor, that your God, Adonai, wiped out from among you every person who followed Baal Peor. Well, now we read another story that we just read in the book of Numbers about God getting mad at the people after they worshiped the God at Baal Peor, the Baal of Peor. And so here, this is from the end of Numbers. This is that famous scene where Balaam gets killed with all the people at Baal Peor. While you held fast to your God Adonai, are all alive today. The people, they got wiped out who were worshiping Baal Peor. But you, if you weren't, you're still alive. See, I have imparted to you laws and rules, as my God Adonai has commanded me, for you to abide by in the land that you are about to enter and occupy. And here it doesn't say Shema, but it says Re'eh. See. So that phrase is used a lot too. In the book of Deuteronomy, it says Shema, listen, or Re'eh, see. Now, does it mean that literally? No, which is why it oftentimes doesn't translate it as see or listen, but heed, pay attention. We say that today, folks. When I say to you, look, I don't mean literally you have to look. Say, look. I'm trying to tell you something. Look. Pay attention, right? You're saying, look. I don't mean literally have to look at me, but look. That's what he says. Look, I've imparted you the laws, okay? I've given you these laws. And what's so important is that so you can stay in the land that you are about to enter and occupy. And as we said, this is the critical part of the book of Deuteronomy, is it says you're going to follow the laws, you don't change the laws, you keep the laws, and then you get to stay in the land. Because we're going to get to it, folks. You don't keep the laws, you get kicked out. Why did it go through all these lists of people who lived and got kicked out of a land? The Ammonites took it away from these people, and everybody got a land when somebody got kicked out. You're going to get kicked out if you don't follow the rules. You'll just be like those other people. That's why they're there. We didn't have to have those people. It's to remind you that God does that. And not just stuff for us, but other people. And here's a phrase, Ushmartem va'asitem, observe them faithfully, for that will be proof of your wisdom and discernment to the other peoples, who on hearing of all these laws will say, surely that great nation is a wise and discerning people. For what great nation is there that has a God so close at hand as is our God Adonai, whenever we call? Now, this is a strange phrase because it seems to imply that there are other gods and there are other places where gods work, and ours just happens to be better than everybody's. But it also is somewhat obvious from the rest of the book of Deuteronomy that the same God who decided that we get the land of Israel decided that these other people get the land too. So this is kind of rhetorical. It's kind of, come on, there's no God, which is why obviously the translator puts the God in lowercase and then God Adonai here. And that is the fact that we do have the word Adonai used over and over and over again in the book of Deuteronomy. Adonai as the name for God is used effectively in the book of Deuteronomy as a way of telling you that this is our God, Adonai. It does use the word Elohim, right? It's right here. It's the word Elohim, Eloheinu, but it's Adonai Eloheinu. It's God. It's Adonai. It's the Lord. Yud He Vav He, your God. And so that we have in the book of Deuteronomy. That is different than what we have in other books of the Bible, where we have Adonai used or Elohim used. Here, Adonai Eloheinu is used. And you know it because when we get to the Shema, which we will next week, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. So we have Adonai's name used, but we also have Eloheinu. So very similar language used throughout the book of Deuteronomy and not used in other parts of the Bible. What great nation has laws and rules as perfect as this teaching that I've set before you this day? And that's the phrase we get over and over again in Deuteronomy. Hayom, this day. What day? This day? This day when Moses says it to the people, or every day when we read it? Hayom, which we read, of course, in the Shema Ve'ahavta. But take the utmost care and watch yourselves scrupulously so that you do not forget the things that you saw with your own eyes, and so that they do not fade from your mind as long as you live, and make them known to your children and to your children's children. And that we have also over and over and over again in the book of Deuteronomy. Teach them diligently to your children. Make sure they know. Make sure they know. The day you stood before your God, Yom, the day you stood before your God Adonai at Horeb, when Adonai said to me, gather the people to me that I may let them hear my words, in order that they may learn to revere me as long as they live on earth, and may so teach their children. There you have it again. And here it says, the day you were at Mount Horeb. Now, I will tell you that that's probably the key to the story, which we forget because by the time we read several weeks of Deuteronomy, if you never read Deuteronomy before, then maybe you look at this with fresh eyes. The day you stood with God at Mount Sinai and got the 10 Commandments was the day. Because it was the day that you covenanted yourself. It was the day that you made a pact and heard the 10 Commandments and made that pact with me at Mount Sinai, with God. Right? And so that is the day. That day is the day that we recall over and over again in the book of Deuteronomy. It's said over and over again, and to some extent, that is probably what the Shema Ve'ahavta is talking about too. When it says, remember Hayom, remember today, the words which I command you. Now we take from it that it's the Shema itself. But the Shema is saying, listen, pay attention. Pay attention to what? Now, from that, we say, well, pay attention every day. Pay attention to God every day. Pay attention to God's miracles around us every day. But in reality, remember what happened at Mount Sinai. So the Shema probably is really referring back. And that's what we learn in Ve'et Hanan right now, Mount Horeb. And that's why I wanted you to see this part today. He came forward and stood at the foot of the mountain. The mountain was ablaze with flames to the very skies, dark with densest clouds. And Adonai spoke to you out of the fire, and you heard the sound of the words, but perceived no shape, nothing but a voice. God declared to you the covenant that you were commanded to observe, the 10 Commandments, inscribing them on 2 tablets of stone. And this is where it says, Aseret HaDvarim. This is the first time we've heard the word 10 Commandments. It's not the first time we've heard 2 stones, 2 tablets. We heard that. But this is the first time that it's called the 10 Commandments. Inscribing them on the 2 tablets of stone. At the same time, Adonai commanded me to impart to you the laws and rules for you to observe in the land that you are about to cross into and to occupy. This is the covenant, folks. It's right there. It's not like a secret. It gets obscured because for the rabbis, the Torah was everything. It wasn't just the 10 Commandments. But there's something special about the 10 Commandments, and the book of Deuteronomy knows that. And the 10 Commandments are the covenant. They are the terms for the agreement. Now, you could say, well, isn't the whole Bible? Isn't the whole Torah? Isn't the whole book of Deuteronomy? Okay. But in all fairness, if you're making an agreement with somebody, you sign a contract with a people on top of it, it's got to be something accessible. It's got to be something understandable. It's got to be something memorable. Like, I know what the terms of the covenant are. Nobody can possibly really remember the whole Torah. Nobody can really possibly remember the entire book of Deuteronomy. But I can remember the 10 Commandments. Some people have a hard time remembering the 10 Commandments, but when you study them a lot, you know them a lot. You know, people go, I forgot number 3. I forgot not taking God's name in vain, or I forgot not coveting, or whatever they forgot. I forgot not bearing false witness. But the other ones, the murder, the adultery, the keeping Shabbat, the honoring prayer, I remember those. I remember those. I only having one God. I remember that. But that's doable. And that was doable. And that was probably the point of this. It gets obscured. We forget. But this line right here is probably the line that really is what this whole book is about. You accept the covenant, the 10 Commandments, and even this translation obscures what really happened. Because here it says, at the same time, Adonai commanded me to impart you the rules, the laws for you to observe. Mary, if you read 13 and 14, what does it say in the King James? Yeah. So you understand that the covenant is you keep the laws and you get to live in the land, right? Right? Those are the rules for you to live there. Now we're going to read very specifically by the end of Deuteronomy, you're going to see very clearly, you break the covenant, you get kicked out. But the implication right from the beginning is these are the laws for you to live in the land. This is a covenant. It's an agreement. You keep your part and I keep my part. For your own sake, therefore, be most careful, since you saw no shape what Adonai spoke to you at Horeb out of that fire, not to act wickedly and make for yourself a sculptured image in any likeness, whatever, the form of a woman, of a man or a woman, the form of any beast on earth, or the form of any winged bird that flies in the sky, the form of anything that creeps on the ground, the form of any fish that is in the water below, and in the waters below the earth, right? And when you look up at the sky and behold the sun and the moon and the stars and the heavenly host, you must not be lured into bowing down to them or serving them. Thus your God, Adonai, allotted to other peoples everywhere under heaven. But you, Adonai, brought you out of Egypt, that iron blast furnace, to be God's very own purpose, people, as is now the case. And so God says to the people, look, you didn't see any deities, you didn't see any images, you didn't see a man or a woman or a fish or anything else, a bird, a dragon, when I gave you the 10 Commandments, because I don't have a form. Other nations do that. God doesn't care really about them doing that, but you know better. Now, this is obviously going to be a problem. And the book of Deuteronomy knows it's a problem, because if we assume that the book of Deuteronomy was written in the kingdom of Josiah, Josiah went around and destroyed all those temples to those gods that had been built during the last 500 years, the last 600 years. Every time since Moses, People had been worshiping these gods because everyone else was. And again, the argument of why they had to wipe out the Canaanites was so they wouldn't have those idols and those statues and those temples to worship in. But didn't wipe them out. They didn't. And it says, Adonai was angry with me on your account and swore that I should not cross the Jordan and enter the good land. Your God, Adonai, is assigning you as heritage. That's the third time he's now told the people in 4 chapters that he can't go over because of them. I must die in this land. I shall not cross the Jordan, but you will cross and take possession of the good land. And again, you're lucky enough to do it. I don't get to do it. Take care then not to forget the covenant that your God, Adonai, concluded with you, and not to make for yourselves a sculptured image in any likeness against which your God, Adonai, has enjoined you. For your God, Adonai, is a consuming fire, an impassioned God, an Elkanah, a jealous God, a zealous God. When you have begotten children and children's children and are long established in the land, should you act wickedly and make for yourselves a sculptured image in any likeness, causing your God Adonai displeasure and vexation, I call heaven and earth this day to witness against you that you shall soon perish from the land that you are crossing the Jordan to possess, and you shall not long endure in it, but you shall surely be wiped out. Yeah, I forgot. You don't even have to go into the next portion for you to be told that. It's already there. Very, very cut and dry. Very obvious. Yeah, I forgot. You got that line already. I call heaven and earth this day to witness against you, right? So, we have the same phrase all the way through the book of Deuteronomy to the very end. If you screw up, you will be wiped out. You will be off the land. And again, this is what we're reading about on Tuesday. Adonai will scatter you among the peoples, and only a scant few of you shall be left among the nations to which Adonai will drive you. There you will serve gods of wood and stone made by human hands. They cannot see or hear or eat or smell. But if you search there, you will find your God Adonai, if only you seek with all your heart and soul. And there we have that phrase, Bechol levavcha uvechol nafshecha. That's another phrase that we get throughout the book of Deuteronomy. When you are in distress, because all these things have befallen you, and in the end, return to and obey your God Adonai. For your God Adonai is a compassionate God, will not fail you nor let you perish. God will not let you forget the covenant you made on oath with your fathers. You have but to inquire about bygone ages that came before you. Ever since God created humankind on earth, from one end of heaven to the other, has anything as grand as this ever happened? Or has it ever like this been known? Has any people heard the voice of God speaking out of fire as you have and survived? Or has any deity ventured to go and take one nation from the midst of another by prodigious acts, by signs and portents, by war, by a mighty hand, an outstretched arm, an awesome power, as your God Adonai did for you in Egypt before your very eyes? And that phrase over and over again in the book of Deuteronomy, and we say it every year at Passover, V'yad chazakah v'yizroa netiyah, with a mighty hand and outstretched arm, that God took us out. Has that ever happened before? Has the God ever done that? Has a deity ever done that? It has clearly been demonstrated to you that Adonai alone is God. There is none else. And that is where, again, it's very clear that it's rhetorical. There is no God. There is no other God. There is no nothing besides God. And that is the phrase that we get essentially repeated to us in the Shema. Shema Israel. And it says Adonai Echad. And here it says, alone there is God. Right? There is only God. Ein Od. From the heavens, God let you hear the divine voice to discipline you. On earth, God let you see the divine fire. And from amidst that fire, you heard God's word. And having loved your ancestors, God chose their heirs after them. God personally, in great divine might, led you out of Egypt to drive from your path nations greater and more populous than you, to take to you into their land and assign it to you as a heritage, as is still the case. Which, by the way, hello? Still the case? Still the case what? That's why it seems like it was written at a later date. So again, you could say Moses is saying that to them now, but it has a lot of power if somebody's writing it 600 or saying it 600 years later in the name of Moses. V'yadata hayom, know therefore this day, and keep in mind that Adonai alone is God. In heaven above and on earth below, there is none other. If that phrase sounds familiar, V'yadata hayom v'hashata el v'ach, again, it says Ki Adonai, Bashamayim mima v'al haaretz, and it's part of Alenu. Mitachan Einod Einod Einod. I mean, that's part of our Alenu. It's again part of our mind all the time. Observe God's laws and commandments, which I enjoin upon you this day, that it may go well with you and your children after you, and that you may long remain in the land your God Adonai is assigning to you for all time. So, we're going to actually stop there because the rest of the chapter, and it's not, you can see it's almost over, but that chapter right there, observe God's laws and commandments, which I enjoin upon you this day. That line right there kind of gives us that understanding of what the book of Deuteronomy again is all about. So if you look at this text, Vishamarta Hukav, let me show you something else that is, let me just show you right now. Let me just show you one thing. Hold it one second. Let me just show you. Thing right here. I was going to show you one thing here. Actually, you know what? I'm going to save it for next week. So next week, when we start up again, we're going to read the end of chapter 4 and part of Elchanan. I mean, like, you know, if we were going to read and read, we'd get to this part right here, which is right here in chapter 6. We get to right here, the Shema. So we're very close to it. We're part of this text. It's the same Torah portion, right? It's the same portion. And it really does go together, which is why when we read the portion of Elchanan, which will be next week's Torah portion, we read that all part of the same portion. But what we have in this chapter that we'll read next week is right here in chapter 5. The Ten Commandments. So between chapter 4, where we just finished, and chapter 6, which we'll read next week, with the Shema V'Ahavta, we actually have a recitation of the Ten Commandments. So if we read the whole thing today, you would have seen what the book of Deuteronomy does at the beginning, which is basically gives us the setup for the Ten Commandments. Then we read the Ten Commandments were given, but we actually get them in this chapter. I mean, we get them in that Torah portion. So it makes sense to some extent to break it at chapter 4, where the Torah portion begins, but you also can see that it's part of the whole first part of Deuteronomy. So it does not follow chronologically. It does not. The story of Beth Peor, the story of Sihon and Og, that comes from the end of the book of Numbers. It just jumped to the chapter 20 of Exodus, but it's not chronological. It's not telling the story that way. Moses is telling it again the way he wants to tell it, and he's telling it as a stream of consciousness. And that's what you have to remember as we read this. This is not a book like other books. It's not like other books of the Bible, and it's not like a lot of other books that you read where, it's a linear story. It's not. It's a nonlinear story with the added benefit of it's very hard to do. And yet Deuteronomy does it effectively. And, I don't want to pick apart the differences between the book of Numbers and book of Deuteronomy because, first of all, it's confusing and it's also not the point. Again, we really probably weren't going to read the two of them back to back like we do. But anyways, people miss the point. And this is very hard to do. As a writer, as a text, it's an amazing book, Deuteronomy. It's an amazing book because if it had just told the story chronologically, probably the force and effect of doing what he just did, the writer, the way that this is told would not have come across the way it was. That's why it's almost hard. It's almost impossible ever to put the book of Deuteronomy down as we have to now and say, okay, we'll read that next week. You can't, because the whole thing is Moses talking. Where does it stop? How do you stop? Yeah, and it's why, according to tradition, according to the book itself, or at least according to the Bible itself, it may have been read at one time. That literally the people on a holiday would have the entire book of Deuteronomy read to them. That's pretty wild. So we'll keep that in mind, and we will see you next week. We'll be in person next week, and we will be at services on Friday night. I just got a text from Rebbe Soul. Are they coming over here today? Okay. All right. Well, take care, everybody. We're going to do some manual labor, but I guess we're not doing the manual labor tonight. So take care, everybody. It was good to see y'all. And hopefully we'll see you in person again next Wednesday or online. Take care, everybody. Take care.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Rabbi.
thanks,
Thank
Rabbi.
you.
Great to be back all together.
Yep,
Yes. Goodbye.
Bye-bye. Bye.